All right, so another one of the fundamentals that I look into when I'm analyzing a project is the initial distribution. And sort of beyond the initial distribution, the ongoing distribution of a project. And this one no one really talks about online except for a guy called Loomdart, and he has a really interesting tweet which I think summarizes the importance of initial distribution really well. So much of a project's success or failure stems from its initial distribution. As more and more stuff moves on-chain, I feel like this will become a more important part of each project's story as people and projects eschew private funding for more open but more fair methods, and the typical distro and Yeet and RDO method doesn't work as well as it once did. So basically, to turn this into understandable words, there's a number of different ways that you can launch a project when you release the token. You can do an airdrop, you can do a pre-sale, like an IDO, or you can get VCs in, more private sort of investing, like a private sale, or you can basically make it open to anyone who is mining or liquidity providing, like providing value, and you give them tokens in exchange for that. There's a number of different ways that you can basically give the initial tokens distributed to your community. And there is successful distribution methods and there's unsuccessful distribution methods. And the projects which can get the distribution correct at the start are the ones that tend to do the best. Okay? And when you're analyzing whether you should invest into a project, generally more so than newer projects, one of the key factors that you want to be looking at is how did they initially distribute the coins to their holder base? Because it is important, and we'll get into why that is. Okay? So, as I just said, there's a number of different ways that you can distribute the tokens, right? You can do airdrops, initial DEX offerings, security token offerings, various reward mechanisms like mining and staking. And yeah, each one has its pros and cons. Regulation isn't a component. The difficulty of organizing it is another one. But yeah, there's a number of different advantages and disadvantages. So here you can see that Bitcoin, when it launched, it gave away tokens through mining. You mine Bitcoin, you get Bitcoin, right? There was no pre-sale for Bitcoin, there was nothing. Ethereum did an ICO. ICOs generally are not favorable, but I think it worked due to how early stage the ICO was and due to how good the project is. Uniswap, they did an airdrop. Compound, they did liquidity mining. And Yearn, they did a fair launch through liquidity mining as well. Okay, so there's a number of different examples here. Now, a token distribution structure allows crypto projects to apportion tokens to various stakeholders. So what you need to understand is that with a crypto project, there's a number of different stakeholders in that ecosystem. A stakeholder is someone who holds a stake in the success of a crypto project. So a miner and a holder and a team member all are different stakeholders, but they all have the same underlying goal, which is to see their project have success, right, that they're supporting. So you could say, like, here's a stakeholder, here's a stakeholder. There's all these different people, right? But they're all connected to each other because they all rely on the success of the project for them to make money, okay? And you need to reward the different stakeholders correctly in order for your project to succeed, and that is done through the initial distribution. So do you just reward, let's say this is the miners, do you just reward these people, right? The miners, do you just reward these ones? Do you just give all the money to the people who are, through an airdrop farm? Do you just give all the money to the team, to the VCs? Who do you give your money to? You need to think as as a crypto project, who are the most valuable stakeholders and how do I reward them in the best possible fashion, right? So the stakeholders are, as we just said, VCs, founders, community, insiders, the public, and the foundation. Okay, so there's a number of different stakeholders who all want to see a project succeed, and each stakeholder has a different level of importance to seeing a project succeed. Okay, and it is a bit of a balancing game to get the initial distribution right. Okay, Token distribution is not just a launch strategy, but a defining element that shapes the entire lifespan of a crypto project. Okay? From outlining the tokenomics to the final stage of community distribution, each step is crucial. Now, I want to emphasize this point again. The initial token distribution is a defining element that shapes the entire lifespan of a crypto project. It is so important to get right, and it's so important that when we use it as a tool to analyze the fundamentals of a project, that we need to consider it as one of the many fundamental characteristics that we look for. Okay, so why is the initial distribution so important? The people who hold a project's token are vital to its success, right? The stakeholders are vital, the ones that we just went over. So why? Because the stakeholders, are the main source of new buyers, right? And in particular, I think rewarding the community, the public, as much as possible, the people who actually support your project, right? So the people mining it, the people who are just like a part of the community. Rewarding the people who are providing the most value is really important, because these people who provide the most value are the main source of new buyers. So for example, if you're launching a project and you're looking for the best people to support your project, maybe that VC who just wants to flip a bunch of coins and doesn't care about supporting you is not a good person to pick, right? Maybe the high-level guys who are just wanting to be involved with the community and love the idea of the project, and they just want to tell everyone, and they've got a brand on Twitter, and they just want to tell everyone because they really love the project and they want to be a diehard fan. Maybe that's the guy that you should reward, right? You want to reward the people who are going to be the best fit inside of your project, who are going to provide the most value, okay? And I have a term to describe that I just came up with in this video of basically how much value someone provides, and the word that I use is a community building score, okay? So if you give and you reward during the initial distribution the wrong people, you're rewarding people who have a poor community building score, right? Because when you think about it, your holders are your affiliates, right? Everyone who is a stakeholder is essentially an affiliate for the crypto project, for the token, right? Because it's like a Ponzi scheme, right? When the project launches, maybe 100 people know about it. They all tell their friends, they build things that attract people, and that brings in maybe 200 people, right? These people are the early investors, and then they invite the next 1,000 people, right? And then if you do it right, these people love the project, and then they invite all of their friends. And the Ponzi continues for as many people that you can basically sucker in to buy. How do you determine how many are going to come into that particular coin? Well, it depends how good you can build communities. It depends how big you can scale it. Depends how good the tech is. Depends what sector you're in. Depends on how big the bull run is. Depends how many competitors you have. Depends on a lot of different things, okay? But one of the main contributing factors is obviously that initial distribution, right? If you reward people at the beginning of your project who are the least likely to support your project, it's going to be very hard for your token to perform well, because you've given your token into the hands of people who are more likely to sell it and are less likely to promote it and bring in that demand that you're looking for, right? What you want to do is you want to reward through the initial distribution the holders who are the least likely to sell and the most likely to bring new people to buy. So maybe there is a VC, for example, Paradigm, who is really good at structuring incentive mechanisms and airdrops to basically beat competitors. So you maybe want to bring Paradigm on, not because they're going to promote your coin, but because they know how to attract users through airdrop campaigns, right? So that's a good example of a VC. You want to bring them on and give them allocation. Maybe you don't want to bring on a bunch of shitty influencers who are just going to talk about your coin and dump the allocation as soon as they get it. Maybe that's not a good person to bring on. Maybe you shouldn't reward the airdrop farmers who make 100 wallets and they farm it from a bunch of different accounts and they just want to dump the token as soon as they get it to cover their cost. Maybe you shouldn't reward those people, right? It is really important who you make rich and that you make the right people rich in the initial distribution, okay? And so when you do a fair launch, right, when you fairly give away basically the initial distribution based on people doing actual things that provide value to the network, right, you're rewarding people with better community building scores, right? If you want to encourage people to do more good things, you reward the people who are doing the things you want to see, right? Imagine it's like children, right? You have a kid who's being naughty. How do you stop them being naughty? Well, you have to encourage the behavior that you want them to do. So if you see another kid, let's say there's like 3 different kids, right? One of them's being a little shit, one of them's being good. You reward the kid being good and you don't reward the kid doing bad. Why would you reward the airdrop farmer who's farming with 100 wallets? Or why would you reward the kid that's playing up and running around in the mud and throwing it at other kids when he's not doing what you want people to be doing, when you're rewarding the wrong behavior? So in the initial distribution, reward good behavior, which is, fair launch. Reward the miners, reward the early people into the community, reward those who provide value, right? And there's a couple projects in crypto who do a really, really good job of the community building. I think the best recent example of a good community builder is Monad, right? So this guy Bill is the cult leader of Monad. Also, the best projects in crypto are cults, so it's funny that he says that. And he basically says that good community creates more community. It's infectious. And this is true, right? The best projects in crypto have really strong communities. The community is everything. Now, this is not a section on community. We'll cover that in the community one. But this section is about the initial distribution, which is a core component in building a strong community, right? When you launch a coin and it was done through an IDO, an initial, or let's say an ICO, an initial coin offering, or an IEO, an initial exchange offering, where you're basically giving a bunch of random people who don't care about your project all the coins, they don't give a fuck about the community. They don't give a fuck about the coin. So you can pick 1,000 people to give your coin to when you launch it. Why give it to the people who don't even care about you? Because you're giving it to people with the lowest community building score. You're basically setting your project up for failure. You got to reward the loyal people, the ones who are doing the things you want the people to be doing in your community. And, a good community, when done right, it brings more people in because people want to be a part of it, especially in crypto. Crypto is just all community. There's no value. It's just all community, right? And yeah, again, it's a Ponzi scheme, right? The better your affiliates, the bigger your Ponzi scheme can grow. How do you get good affiliates? Well, you reward them. And they will keep doing good. So holders with a good community building score are able to bring in large amounts of new holders or contribute value, which attracts new users. Okay? So there's 2 ways. They either do marketing or they build shit which brings people in. All right? That's the best possible outcome for, good community score people. And 100 core diehard holders is infinitely better than 1,000 pre-salers, just looking to basically pump and dump by getting a ICO allocation, right? They don't give a fuck about the coin. Look at all the ICOs and IEOs that died. Why'd they die? It's because they fucking gave it their coin to a bunch of people who don't give a fuck. It's like, imagine a girl who just fucks any dude, right? No one's going to take her seriously. No one's going to wife up a girl who, and I don't want to make this really like sexist or anything, but like, if a girl just fucks every guy, imagine a girl who fucks every guy. No dude wants to take her seriously for obvious reasons. But if a girl is hard to get, if she really protects that side of her and, only wants to give it to the right person, right? The person that she gives it to is going to respect her for that so much more and is more likely to stick with her because of the value and the respect that they've created between each other, right? If she gives it to someone who respects her, they're going to respect her back. If you give coins to the people who bring the most value, they're going to give you value back. It's the same concept. You want a diehard loyal fan, not a bunch of people who just want to fuck you and dump you, right? And that's what, when you do IEOs, ICOs, VC stuff, that's when projects tend to run into a bit of trouble there, okay? And it's a bit like that movie Spartan, the 300 or whatever it's called. They basically took on multiple armies. And obviously it's a movie, but it's a good metaphor. They took on multiple armies significantly bigger than theirs, with fucking elephant, fucking arrow shooting things, and like just